All right, we're
All
live, Jeremy.
right, we have people coming in. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, or good night, depending on where you're joining us from. If you're watching after, then hopefully it's a great day wherever you are. My name is Jeremy Grandstaff. I'm the Senior Vice President of Business Development and Partnerships with excuse me, with CurbCutOS. I'm so excited to be with you today. And I'm also excited to be joined by Jacqueline. Jacqueline, introduce yourselves to our viewers and our reviewers.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Hall. I'm a Senior Vice President at Ipsos on our user experience research and design team. And I oversee all of our work with financial services clients, as well as a lot of our accessibility work that we do. Super excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Jacqueline, for joining us. Now, I'm sure that you read in our promotional materials, Rylan Broom was supposed to be joining us today as well. And Rylan had a family emergency today. And so him and I got together yesterday and recorded his part of today's presentation so that we would still be able to bring that to you on video. So he may be popping in if he is able from the car, but our thoughts and prayers are with Rylan today. So let's go ahead and get started, Jacqueline. This is, excuse me, I'm so sorry. This is a webinar called Creating an Accessible Mindset. The concept here is that we want to talk about this as a business growth strategy for financial services. And again, I appreciate Jacqueline and Rylan for joining me on the stage today as we come together to present this knowledge to you. Our purpose for today has 4 components. First, we want to increase the understanding, excuse me, I'm so sorry. We want to increase the understanding and make a compelling case for accessible digital experiences when we're talking about financial services institutions. Number 2, we want to leave you with tangible ways that you can improve accessibility within digital banking. And number 3, we want to talk about how to present the both. Jacqueline, how do you say that? The both
Yeah,
or
I'm sure it's
and?
reading it to you in a funny way. Both
I know,
and.
right? Because I just dawned on like both or both and.
Both and. You got it.
The both and argument for accessibility, which balances inclusion with business outcomes. And then number 4, as we do with all CurbCutOS webinars, we want to make sure that you're leaving with practical tools, that will spark meaningful conversations and overcome resistance within your organization. So, on that note, we have a packed agenda. We're going to get right into it. What is going on there? All right. So, bear with me just a moment, folks. There we go. Okay. So looking at today's agenda, we're going to start with a quick icebreaker. We're going to talk about what happens when accessibility isn't included. We want to talk about building the business case for financial services. We're going to have Ryland share some of his knowledge and really get into the both and argument for accessibility. We'll leave you with some tools and takeaways and have an opportunity for you to check out and tell us what you're taking away from today's webinar. So if you wouldn't mind, pop over to the chat window and tell us what aspects of the online banking experience might cause problems for people with disabilities. So again, that question is, what might cause problems for people who have disabilities in creating an accessible online experience? And you know what, Jacqueline? It's not showing me chat. So you're going to have to tell me if we have any takers here. Don't be shy. Or you can just come off of mute and tell us. That's another way
I
to do
got
that
it.
as well.
Steve said, not screen reader friendly.
Aha. Well said, Steve. Excellent. And really, that gets into making sure that people with visual disabilities can be able to use their screen readers and be able to make sure that they're being able to access content. Excellent. Any others before we move on? All right.
Nothing
Well,
in the chat.
again, if you want to unmute, we're happy to have you do that as well. And if you're having trouble doing that, please let me know in the chat.
Pamela shared accessible documents might
accessible
be
documents.
a challenge.
Yeah, you know, I was actually talking with a friend of mine who's a mortgage broker, Jacqueline, and she said to me, every time I send my contracts to people with disabilities, I never hear from them again. And I said, well, what happens when you call? And she goes, well, I'm so busy. I don't have this, right? There's problem number one. But I said, is it possible that the documents you're sending them to sign are not accessible? She goes, you know, I never thought about that. Turns out they actually were. And so that's always something to think about, especially if you are trying to get someone to open a new account. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So let's go ahead and dive in. Before we do, though, I do want to cover some quick logistics. So live transcription is turned on. And so if you need that live transcription, it should be working for you, or you should be able to turn that on. Control-Shift-O turns on and off your video. I always love it when people are on video, and that's coming from a guy who's blind. So I just think it is fun to know who is here. And so if you're able to do that, please, and you feel comfortable, you can do that. To unmute is Control-Shift-M if you're using your keyboard. Many may not know this, but if you're actually in the Teams window and you just want to come off mute for a second, you can hit Control-Space. Raising your hand is Control-Shift-K. If you want to ask a question or need to get our attention, please make sure you do that. The chat, I believe, is Control-Shift-R. That was noted in the documentation, though it never seems to work for me. We will be sending a recap a couple days after this with the notes in English and translation, Spanish translations, as well as a video recording and a summary of the call. If you need a link to the presentation to follow along, please do let me know that in the chat and we can get that for you. We always review the presentation after, and so if someone needs the link to follow along, let us know. And I would just like to say a huge thank you to Jacqueline, who I did not know was going to have to monitor the chat and stuff for me. So thank you for letting me put you on the spot to do that.
Of course.
All
Anytime.
Right. So I'll turn it over to myself, Jacqueline, to kick us off with our first one. So what happens when accessibility isn't included? And yes, I absolutely did a play on words with that. You know, I always think that in order to have a conversation around accessibility, it probably helps to start with a quick foundation. So we're going to do that very quickly. The foundation of accessibility really in the US begins with the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Now that has 504 or Section 504, sometimes you'll hear it called, and Section 508. The way I like to quickly talk about the difference between 504 and 508 is this. Think of it this way. 504 says that anything that has to do with public access to services, so whether that's state and local government, public healthcare companies, being able to walk into my doctor's office, dentist office. I'm not actually sure if it covers dentists, but we'll assume it does. And other publicly available services, healthcare especially, that has to be accessible to people with disabilities. 508 says at the federal level, we have to have accessibility. And if you do business with the federal government, then you have to have accessibility baked into what you're doing as well. That is the easiest way to tell the difference between the two. Now, again, I'm buzzing through these really quick because we want to spend more time on the amazing stuff that Jacqueline and Rylan are going to share with you. But after the Rehabilitation Act, we dove into WCAG, or the World Content. I do that every time. The Web Content Guidelines for accessibility. And again, those were revised into 4 principles in 2008. So I just want to quickly talk about these. Perceivable. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The information and the user interface must be presentable to people that are in a way that they're going to be able to perceive it. So if you are a person with a disability and we're talking about a video, for example, and I need to get something out of the video, but it's just music and pictures, that's not going to be perceivable to me. Operable. The user interface and the components of the website must be operable. It has to be able to be used by the user, and they have to be able to operate it. Understandable. They have to be able to understand how to operate the website or the app or whatever it is that we're talking about with the digital piece to it. And then robust. I find this is the really fascinating one for me that I really love, because this says it has to be interpretable by more than just one screen reader. It has to be able to anticipate and be interpretable by things that we may not even develop or have developed yet. That is really fascinating to me, that people are thinking that far out and saying, you know what, let's make this a place of competition, because only in competition, as I'm sure we'll hear from from our other 2 presenters today, when we have competition, then things get better and better and better. And that's how we do it, right? Now, doing business in Europe, be aware, you've got the EAA, or European Accessibility Act, that comes online and will start being enforced on June 28th of 2025. Many countries, they have to adopt it at the country level, and we are starting to see that to happen. I actually just did a whole bunch of research today to find out what countries are doing and how they're implementing it. For example, in the Netherlands, they will fine up to 103,000 euros for people who are not compliant. So there's lots of different ways that this is being implemented. If you've got questions about that, feel free to ask, and we're happy to take that offline, because that can get very country specific. So I just want to talk for a second about what happens when you have an accessible user experience. And this is me thinking about some of the things that I deal with, right? I have 4 different banks that I deal with. There are times when there is not consistent operability from my phone to my computer. And what that means is there are times when I need to do something, I have to go to the computer because the phone isn't accessible and won't let me do things. Sounds inconvenient, but it's really called a time suck for me. Overlays prevent me from making payments. There is one bank that I deal with, not for very long, unless they want to fix the problem. But literally, I can't make a payment unless I have somebody who can see do it for me. That is a major problem for me, and probably will cost them my business. Pop-up advertisements, sometimes when I log in, I swear to you, it pops up on my screen with something that they're trying to sell me, and it will not actually let me see my accounts. Opening accounts, we talked about this just a couple minutes ago. PDF forms to open accounts that aren't accessible. And then unclear errors. This is probably a very big one for me. I see this consistently, and they'll say, please make sure you correct the errors, but there's nothing telling me what those errors are. Jacqueline, I'm getting ready to come over to you shortly, but before I do, I want to just quickly say some of the things that we see in worldwide examples of accessibility, lack of accessibility in banking services, excuse me, overcomplicating things, non-standard user interface patterns, cluttered pages, poor contrast, accessible HTML. I'm sorry, I apologize. Inaccessible HTML that blocks assistive technologies, missing alt text and charts. Please, if you're alt texting a chart, don't just say chart. Tell us what the chart is, and what we can get about, get from that. And we'll talk about this in a little bit longer. Inconsistent headers, so it's hard to figure out where we're going. No sign language support or simplified text for deaf users. Those are just some of the things that have been uncovered in some of the research that Ipsos has done. And I know Jacqueline's going to talk about that. So why do we spend so much time on accessibility? Well, before I turn it over to you, Jacqueline, I just want to talk for a moment about the curb cut effect. And curb cuts were originally created, for people in wheelchairs, right? They were created in a way that people in wheelchairs would be able to get out of the street, to be able to mobily move around where they needed to go. And what we found is that after curb cuts were created, now they're used by moms with strollers or kids pulling their wagons. Or actually, I seen a mom and dad pulling a huge wagon the other day with all their kids on it. I thought that was cute. And even delivery men who are deliverymen or delivery women who are delivering packages to people. I've seen them being able to use curb cuts. In other words, when you design something for persons with disabilities, when you design your user experience to include persons with disabilities, it gives you the opportunity to design a better product. I like to say the stellar user experience that is going to connect with all. And with that, I want to turn it over to Jacqueline to take us deeper into how one might come and be able to get over some of these common obstacles that we see to organizations that are trying to implement accessibility. For example, not understanding how to do accessibility in the first place, or even remaining in this compliance versus, a human-centered approach to design. These are some of the things that we see that if you're reviewing the presentation that get in the way of accessibility. And I know Jacqueline's going to talk a little bit about these, and then Ryland will give us some of his knowledge in this as too. So Jacqueline, let me turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. So how do we overcome these obstacles that Jeremy just referenced in his personal life and like the overall takeaways for banking experiences that are not accessible? Well, we need to make a case, not quite yet, but we can go to the next, stay where you are.
Sorry.
No, all good. We need to make a case for accessibility. So often, as Jeremy talked about with WCAG and EAA, there are legal and regulatory pressures. But I think we all know that within an organization, it takes much more than that to actually shift mindsets and enact change. So I'm very excited to talk about the importance of accessibility in financial services, and specifically how adopting an accessibility first mindset can not just benefit your end users and all end users at that, but also your business. So why should we invest in accessibility? Now you can go to the next slide. Simply put, of course, it's the right thing to do. When an online banking experience is not compatible with assistive tech or the built-in accessibility features are not functioning properly, we are leaving people out of the experience. As Jeremy just said, if he can't get past the pop-up, then he's not even able to make a payment, a pretty critical task. And so we're basically blocking an entire group of people from being able to access something that they need to live their day-to-day life. But that doesn't always make the most compelling argument. So let's talk about some data. Next slide. 75% of consumers believe accessibility is an issue that is important for brands to address. So this is not just among people with disabilities. This is Gen Pop saying they have expectations for brands to step up and consider the needs of all people and make changes with the users with disabilities needs in mind. You can go to the next slide. Additionally, 70% of consumers believe companies should actively work to increase diversity and inclusion in the financial services industry. So this is very specific to what we're talking about here. People clearly see the inequity and the opportunity to improve financial services for all of the customers. Next slide. Data also shows that 57% of people with disabilities rate the accessibility of a website as the top consideration when they are selecting a banking provider or an insurance provider. That's no small number. That's well over half of people saying, when I'm evaluating where to go, I don't really care about your products as much. I don't even know if I care about your customer service as much. What I am paying attention to is, can I just access the website from the start? And this is no small opportunity. This is no small percentage of people. You can go to the next slide. 61 million adults in the US have a disability. That's 27%. And we know that this number is growing. There's a chart on the right side that shows 2016 through 2021, a CDC report. In 2016, 24.6% of adults had a disability. And in 2021, it's 27.2%. And with the aging population, this is going to continue to increase. So you're not leaving out a small, niche portion of your customers. There's actually a massive impact you could be making and a huge part of the marketplace that you're missing out on. If you go to the next slide, this is also largely because they have tremendous buying power, nearly $2 trillion in disposable income. That is not nothing. They as in everyone, but people with disabilities do so much of their shopping online. And this includes them shopping for financial products. So they're leaving this money on the table in banking as well. If you go to the next slide, we also know that 71% of people with disabilities claim that they will leave a website if it's not accessible. And I think Jeremy's anecdotes illustrate that. If I can't get through, why would I come back? I can't even get onto the website. So I'll just leave the website and take my money elsewhere. So what are these common barriers that people with disabilities face when using banking websites? You can go to the next slide. Jeremy did touch on some of these, but we wanted to understand, where are online banking experiences falling short? At Ipsos, we conducted a study in the US and in the UK. We had people with disabilities across the blind and low vision community, the deaf and hard of hearing community, as well as the mobility impaired and the neurodivergent, go through two sites, let's say two banking sites, popular banking sites per market, and complete a series of common and critical banking tasks, such as just shopping for a new credit card. Should sound so easy. Many of us do that without any problem. But we uncovered that there are many common barriers that people with disabilities, and again, this is across disabilities. We included folks from all those different buckets that I mentioned, and we wanted to understand, where are these experiences falling short? Next slide. So we did identify 5 critical barriers to online banking that we observed in the US and the UK. The first is overcomplicated product selection. So there are too many screens, too much clicking, too much scrolling. It takes way too long to get to the detail on one product and then make product comparisons and then understand, was that the right product for me? Well, I made it all the way down this click stream and I have to go back to find a different product to evaluate. So way overcomplicated to understand, what are my options? And then among these options, which one is best for me? And this is often because the second point here is a lack of standard common controls. So there are no standard interactions to set expectations. As Jeremy mentioned, there isn't a consistent experience from the app to the website for the same bank. The same brand has different standard interactions, or there aren't standard interactions rather, in those two designed experiences. Third, it's difficult to find relevant information. And I didn't know you were going to say everything relevant to my part of the presentation, Jeremy, but it is true that many banks are mixing new product offers in with critical banking tasks and information. And so you're seeing a pop-up for some advertisement, and all you really need to understand is your account balance. And you can't get to the account balance because it's all kind of in the same place, if you will, or on the same screen. So they have difficulty finding relevant content and completing these critical tasks. The fourth is lack of color contrast. Poor color contrast makes it difficult for people with low or no vision. And even when there were customizable tools or controls to adjust the color contrast, we found that participants had a really difficult time finding and getting to the customized control. And lastly, but very importantly, inaccessible HTML. So code was not even architected to support assistive technology. And one example of this is a rotating carousel tile. They move so quickly that someone might not even be finished reading or understanding what content they're looking at. And then also they're missing labels. So they don't even have the alt text, or they don't even have the sort of like transcript for you to understand what you're looking at.
Before I go
So
to the next one, I
yeah.
just wanted to say on number 3, what's really fascinating about that too is I believe that for you guys, I'm sorry, for people who can see, there's probably like an X to close it out. For
Yeah.
me, there's nothing. And
Yeah.
the only way I can get out of those boxes is to actually say, sure, I'll accept the offer, which is
Mm.
fascinating to me.
It
So
is, and
I just
it's
wanted to
interesting
flag
because
that.
that makes me think of color contrast as a sighted person who definitely needs glasses but is in denial. Sometimes I can't find the X, and I'm like, is this on purpose so that I have to, click into the offer? Yes, but also the color contrast of the X against the background is not even visible to me. So that's a great point,
That's
Jeremy.
so interesting to know. I love that. All right.
So what do we do to make these experiences more accessible? What we like to say is that you must adopt an accessibility first mindset. So these these barriers that we just went through, to overcome them is not a simple checklist. It is truly a mindset shift. It requires other people getting on board. It requires socializing these ideas. And so what we say is an accessibility first mindset, which is saying it's not enough to fix and remediate after the fact. You need to include accessibility in your process, in your conversations, in your roadmap from the very start. And in the disability community, this is referred to as shifting left. So you want to shift the consideration of accessibility into the very, very, very beginning of your process. And there are tangible ways that you can adopt an accessibility first mindset. So our study also identified 6 ways that we can make banking more accessible. Next slide. So first, go beyond auditing, please. Compliance does not guarantee accessibility, meaning just because your individual pages are compliant doesn't mean that someone who is using perhaps like keyboard only control or a screen reader can actually go from page to page successfully, because the auditing doesn't actually test that entire user flow. So we need to go beyond auditing and compliance and engage people with disabilities in the end-to-end product development process. Second, simplify and prioritize the most important information. So we don't need to get rid of less important or less critical information, but we need to make it available on demand so that people can quickly and easily find the content they're looking for or complete the task that they're looking to complete. Third is establishing uniform interaction patterns across all pages and all tasks, and when possible, all devices, right? So that people can understand how and predict how they are supposed to interact or can interact with the content. And fourth, somewhat related to that, is giving users control, but with built-in accessibility features, not overlays. Please avoid accessibility overlays. And if you've joined any webinar on accessibility, I'm sure they've said exactly that. Fifth is train your developers on accessible code. So important. Adding alt text is like very low-hanging fruit, for example, or labeling links correctly. And then lastly, ensuring human support. What we heard across all of the interviews is that I'm still going to get to a point where I might need to talk to somebody, and finding a way to talk to those people can also be inaccessible. Finding the contact on the website or understanding where they can get in touch with someone. So ensuring there is still human support when needed. So by adopting an accessibility first mindset, implementing some of these best practices, you'll start to see the benefits of accessibility. So let's talk a little bit more about what those benefits are at a high level. First, it does expand your customer base. So you will be reaching more people if you have a more accessible online banking experience, which will inevitably increase the number of people who are delighted to come back to your website or app and continue to be a customer. Second is, Jeremy talked a lot about the curb cut effect, but it does improve the experience for all. So making these changes, let's say to the pop-up where the X is not visible for me, nor is it visible for Jeremy, improving that it will improve the experience for all of us. Third, it does differentiate your brand and boost your brand reputation because no one is doing this perfectly. There's so much space for improvement. So you could stand out as a brand who is trying to make a difference and trying to improve, and being sort of like recognized for that effort is a huge piece of this journey. Fourth is it drives innovation. I love to think about people with disabilities as innovators. I mean, they've had to create workarounds constantly for so long. So let's learn from those workarounds to understand what could change and innovate in our products and in our designs. Fifth is it does create efficiencies and improves the delivery of your product or service, right? So if you're identifying the bugs before they become bugs, you're going to have a more efficient process in the end. And lastly, and of course, very importantly, it does reduce legal risks and avoid costly legal fees by focusing on accessibility. You can go to the next slide. And I want to stress that it's never too late to get started. I think a lot of conversations about what you can do to improve accessibility, you're like, by the end, you're like, oh my God, I have so much to do. But it's never too late to get started because, next slide, accessibility really is a journey. And while compliance is not enough, it is certainly the starting point and the foundation for what we call the accessibility maturity model here. So at the base of this pyramid, we have compliance. So are our experiences meeting the legal requirements for compliance? That is the foundation of where we are. But second, on the next rung in the pyramid, are our experiences useful and usable by everyone and varying audiences, regardless of the assistive technology that they're using. The third level of this pyramid is helpful. So not only can they use my app or website, but are our experiences helping them get the information that they need, accomplish the task easily, seamlessly, quickly, right? The amount of time I know it can take for folks to navigate an inaccessible website is huge. So is it helpful? And then lastly, is it innovative? So are our experiences delightful, lovable, predictive for folks, and forward thinking? So as the assistive technology changes, as AI becomes a part of this equation, which we're not even touching on today, is our product roadmap accounting for that? But there are simple ways to get started. So I'll leave you with what feels more digestible, right? So tips for getting started include not being afraid to start small. You can just do one thing differently tomorrow, or have one more conversation about accessibility with a colleague to make it part of your strategy, part of your dialogue in the office. Second is finding like-minded people and collaborating. And lastly is not being afraid of failure, because you will fail in this process. It's part of the process. So you have to embrace iteration and trying again, and knowing that every small incremental change can make a really big impact. And not just for your users, but for your business. So
Awesome.
thank you all.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I really appreciate that. That was amazing. And I love the additional slides that were there this morning when I came into the office. That pyramid is phenomenal. I love that. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I am going to actually stop sharing my screen right now, and I'm going to ask Jacqueline to share our sorry, this is not letting me do that.
No worries. I bet if I share, I can take over the screen and
there
you
we
don't
go.
have to touch a thing.
You got it. So I'm going to have Jacqueline share the video. Folks, we may go about 5 minutes over. I'm going to ask that you please stick with us so that we can make sure this is a complete experience for you. Again, Rylan was not able to join us today due to an unanticipated family emergency. So I'm going to have Jacqueline play the video that Rylan and I recorded last night so that you can get the wisdom he was going to bring you as well. So take it away, Jacqueline.
All right. And please let me know, come off mute or put in the chat if you do not hear audio in about 30 seconds.
We got it. I think. You know what? It is not showing audio. Jacqueline, I don't think it's showing audio. We may have to just send it as a follow-up.
Not be able to be with you.
Oh, there it goes.
Is everyone else?
You know what? You have to stay off of mute.
Oh, that I can do. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Let's give it another go. We're finding out a lot about the accessibility of this platform, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
All right, here we go.
I'm Rylan Vroom. I'm a group manager of digital accessibility at Scotiabank, which is one of Canada's big 5 banks. I do have to apologize for not being able to be with you live on the webinar, just because I had to suddenly travel to a funeral. So I'm thankful to Jeremy for connecting with me the night before so we could do this, but I will make an effort to join the Q&A section by while I'm in a car driving for 5 hours. So we'll see how that works. But if I'm not able to be there, I mean, Jeremy and the Ipsos / CurbCutOS team can definitely forward me any questions. I'll be happy to answer those. So I have been in the corporate digital accessibility world for about 9 years now. And before that, I was an assistive technology instructor. I stacked contracts with different blindness and deafblindness related organizations. And I also bring a lifetime of experience, of lived experience to the digital accessibility space. I am completely blind. I use a screen reader. I use refreshable braille. I'm a bit of a tech geek, if you will. So I do have sort of 2 braille displays sitting in front of me. I do have, I run Linux and Windows and Mac and everything like that. And I love kind of pushing the boundaries when it comes to tech. And so when it comes to the Canadian financial industry, it's really interesting. It's very different from the US financial industry. In Canada, banking is kind of a protected sector. So only Canadian banks can participate. It's starting to change as we get more financial, what we call fintechs or financial tech companies that are coming in, offering sort of small chunks or different services of what a bank would offer, but only partially, if it makes sense, like slices of the overall bank pancake. And so as a result, from an accessibility perspective, you end up with 5 or 6 big banks, and they're all doing basically the same thing. They're offering different numbers for different services, different fees, different accounts. But from an accessibility perspective, they're all pretty much on par, as long as you are looking for kind of an ADA compliant experience. All of our banks have websites. We all have web banking apps. We all have mobile apps. And we all have digital accessibility teams like the one that I lead, doing their stuff, working with software partners, working with people to build accessible banking products for our clients. So it's kind of different than the US, where there's a lot more competition. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of banks. There's a lot more, I think, centralization, especially when it comes to smaller banks where you can buy sort of ADA compliant online banking platforms and just slap a brand on it. We don't necessarily have that here, at least in terms of banks. We do for credit unions somewhat, but for banks, everyone kind of has their own interface. They do things differently. And where that really comes into play is if I think of like older screen reader users or people who have lost their sight later in life to use a screen reader, they might be just used to one bank's interface. They don't want to change. That might actually be a barrier to them changing. And as long as the bank doesn't change its interface, then we're good to go. And some banks have kept their web interfaces alive for 10, 15, dare I say 20 years. But, you know, with change comes progress and so on. And that's where we are.
So help us understand from your perspective, how are initiatives that have to do with accessibility prioritized and managed on a day-to-day basis?
Well, every bank has a different topology. Some banks, so here's the thing. In Canada, all of the digital accessibility teams of all the banks talk together. We actually have a forum. You'd never see this in the US, where you'd never see like Wells Fargo sit down with JP Morgan Chase. But in Canada, we actually have a little forum that talks about the common challenges that we have. So let's say, you know, all 5 banks, we use the same check deposit feature, you know, from the same vendor. We're all having problems with that vendor. Well, we'll get together and we'll say, hey, we all have problems with this vendor. We should have them come before all of us, and then we'll all tell them at the same time how bad their product is. And then they'll hopefully, you know, take that more to heart than just one of us doing it. So we have that kind of little forum on the side. And as you know, digital accessibility, there are a lot of common challenges right across, right? So every bank does things differently. Some banks approach it more from a, like, we started accessibility in the risk department. Some started it in terms of like internal controls, internal compliance. I was fortunate to start in, you know, at the beginning of my career, it was kind of a back office information technology. The bank didn't really know where to put us, but now we're solidly in digital. You know, we're in the software building shop, for lack of a better term. And so when I started, you know, I started at this place called the Digital Factory, and the model was a startup sitting on top of a bag of gold. So if you can imagine kind of the open offices, open, you know, ping pong table and bowling alley, all that. We had that. We had a chef from a big tech company in the States too. And you know, accessibility people and designer people, product owners, developers, all in one place, just ideating, building products. And over the years, accessibility has only grown. And it's because we were able to get sort of that senior buy-in to say, you know, not only talking about accessibility from a compliance point of view, but accessibility from an inclusive design point of view. And how do we build stuff that is going to delight our customers? How do we build stuff that's going to enhance our reputation in a field where, you know, in Canada, Statistics Canada put out a census a few years ago, and they said 21 to 22% of people with disabilities, or of people in Canada, identify as having a disability. So that's a lot. That's billions of dollars of disposable income, especially once you factor in family and friends. So, you know, it's a big priority, and it's one that we want to get right.
What I love about this is you are totally aligning with what Jacqueline was just talking about when she was talking about baking it in from the start. And it sounds like that's almost what you guys have been able to do, is take it from that risk prevention model into the growth opportunity model, if you will. I'm kind of coining that last part, right?
So you say that, but banks are big places. And so, sometimes you'll get, a business line that wants to build things and they say, well, what do I have to do? Because I don't have money. What do I have to do? And so unfortunately, even today, there's still aspects of compliance mindset that you will find where the goal is kind of risk aversion. But I think they're getting less and less over time.
How do you change that? That was going to be my question. Like, how do you help shift leadership from that prevention mindset to more of the promotion or design from the beginning mindset?
So some leaders will just get it, and it's great when they get it. I'm very fortunate in that I had a leader who got it, and that was super duper helpful. But as I watch, digital accessibility in general, diversity, equity, and inclusion, move across an organization of 100,000 plus people, what I started to see is that it really is in many ways, a bottom-up approach. So one of the big things that I've seen work really well is employee resource groups. You start from within. You've got an employee resource group for people with disabilities. And in my organization, I chaired my ERG for quite a few years. And at the beginning, it was small, and then it grew, and it grew. And what really helped it grow was in terms of marketing, marketing to the internal employee population and saying, hey, you don't have to have just a disability to be a part of this group. You can be an ally too. And then tons of people popped up and said, my dad's getting old. He can't see what he used to. I'm really grateful that our banking app, allows me to help him enlarge the text so that he can still do his banking. And we start to get more and more of those stories to the point where leadership can't help but notice it. And so I think, when talking to leadership about these kind of things and about why you would just make things accessible from the start, you start really putting it into a life stories. You tell that story of disability. You talk about temporary and situational disabilities and moving on to permanent disabilities and what that means for people and drawing it on a leader's experience themselves. When's the last time you went to a noisy bar? When did you want to know the baseball score while it said noisy bar? You couldn't hear the commentator. Well, thank goodness for closed captioning, right? And so in my experience, it's been a lot of those conversations, but then there's more stats coming out. There's more companies that are posting numbers as to how to do this, how to look at what is the cost of accessibility. And I wish I had the source for my stat, but one thing I read a few years ago that's always stuck with me is that if you build a product and then you have to bake accessibility in after, you could be paying upwards of 35% more. But if you build accessibility into a software product from the start, then you could be paying maybe 1 or 2% more, as opposed to if you didn't build accessibility in. And I think that stat might actually be too high because nowadays we have publicly accessible design systems like Material, the Material design system. They've got components. Every big organization is going to have their own design system. And if they're smart, they're baking accessibility into all their components, then that makes your software have a much higher common denominator of accessibility built in. So
it almost, and it's so funny because I'll own for everybody, Rylan and I, put together these questions, and ironically, you just kind of walked your way right through all the rest of the questions, which I thought was really cool. It seems to me, Rylan, like creating that inclusive, exceptional customer experience for everybody is going to work off of what you're doing for people with disabilities. Any other final thoughts, you want to make sure you're sharing them with other leaders of financial institutions as they're thinking about how to approach accessibility and digital accessibility, digital online experiences that work for all. Yeah. Any other final thoughts that you want to share? Go.
Yes, 100%. Thank you. Make sure that you're not only making things accessible for your customers, but also your employees. That's a big one. It's something that hasn't necessarily happened at the same speed because, employees, well, they already work there, they'll figure it out, or we will give them an accommodation to work it out. And that's not the best approach. And Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft a few years ago, he said a really good quote. And it was that the more diverse your product team is, the better software you end up creating, because you're not creating it from a one size fits all mentality. You're creating it from a diversity of perspectives, and that's really the meat and potatoes of making an accessible employee experience or an inclusive employee experience, so that you can bring in people from all walks of life, from all ages and abilities, and that kind of thing. And you can give them a good working experience. You can be a good work life partner for them. And when you do that, they will be a good work partner to you. And I think that you would experience a lot more innovation. You'd experience a lot more loyalty. You would experience a lot more of those things that you'd want in good employees, because the company is treating them well. And it's a hard thing to do, to really focus on your employee-facing software. I know Canada doesn't have legislation until 2028. At that point, then we start to see laws that say, hey, you're going to need to make your employee-facing software accessible too. But up to this point, we haven't had it. I would hazard a guess that if you're outside the ADA's sphere of influence, you also don't have it. And then that starts to limit the kind of people that you bring in. And the more people with disabilities, the more people that you can help, the more people that you can bring in on your side, I think the better.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Rylan, for being able to do this the night before. I will turn it back to myself, who's going to take us through our next section, and then we'll have a Q&A later. So thanks, everybody. All right. So you should be seeing my screen now. And again, a huge thank you to Rylan for sharing his knowledge with us and some insights from his vantage point, both being a person who's blind and also being a person who is leading a team at a bank in Canada, at Scotiabank in Canada. I am going to just quickly say that Jacqueline and I teamed up, Ipsos and CurbCutOS teamed up to do this webinar, really because we're here to help. Right? Jacqueline talked about, let's bake it in from the beginning. Obviously, we are getting ready to run out of time, and I do want to create a space for people to ask questions if you've got them. We're going to try to make this as quick as possible, but I at least wanted to highlight that CurbCut and Ipsos come together and do what we call the three-way audit, looking at an automated audit, a user flow test from Ipsos, and then that expert a manual audit review. By doing that, we're able to help you catch 98% of the errors. Now, as Jacqueline said, it's not just about auditing. We want to help you be able to figure out how to take what you learn in that audit and be able to apply it to do the shifting left. And this is also going to be in your PowerPoint. This talks about how to start that conversation. Due to timing, I don't have the time to go through all those pieces, but I do want to create an opportunity to ask your questions. I know we are running out of time. So if for some reason you have to leave, at least leave in the chat for us one thing that you're taking away from today's conversation, or one thing that you might do tomorrow as a result of the conversation. And then, of course, we will follow up with everybody and have the PowerPoint available, as well as Ryland's video, and just the Ipsos report that Jacqueline had referenced as well. So Q&A. Anybody have any questions? Please feel free to just unmute. It's going to go quicker if you do, because the Q&A box I just found is not that accessible on Teams. So if you have questions, please unmute yourself. Tell us who you are and what's your question. Anybody? We're here to answer them. Anybody? Well, Jacqueline, we must have done such a great job.
We answered all the
questions
questions before they could even ask them.
I know. I feel really good about that. Okay. Well, in that case, if you feel so inclined, I'd love to know what you're taking away from today's conversation. And so I'm just going to quickly call on people to see if I can get you to unmute and give us your thoughts. So Amy, I'm going to come to you first. One quick thing you're taking away from the dialogue. Remember to unmute yourself, and we'll try Jenna next. Amy, anything you want to share? Okay, we're going to move through this really quick. So Jenna, anything you'd like to share before I go to Pamela?
I just want to say thank you so much. This presentation has been fantastic. My colleague Sophie and I have been on the line listening. We've recently done some banking accessibility work over here at Canadian Tire Corporation, and just always looking for tips and tricks, but happy to see that our insights kind of align nicely with your presentation. And I think we just need more people sitting in on these types of conversations. So thank you so much.
You know, Jenna, you are on my list of people that I've wanted to talk to. So maybe we can schedule some follow-up there. I love that. I'm going to come back to you, Amy, in just a moment. But first, I'm going to go to Pamela, then Amy, and then Roshan. So Pamela, anything you want to share? One thing you're taking away from today. Go ahead.
Thank you for a great presentation, and thanks for having us here today. Absolutely loved the content. I've just moved into the financial services sector from the post-secondary sector, so it's definitely a big transition, but the work that we do with accessibility is still the same. So I definitely love the concept of ensuring accessibility and the universal design at the onset. I think that's the key instead of having to backtrack. And like Ryland said, sometimes the cost of remediating some of those accessibility issues definitely could have an impact. So doing that at the onset, I think, is so important. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. I'll come back to check in with Amy. And I didn't say this at the beginning of this quick piece, but if you're not able to unmute for some reason or not able to weigh in with your voice, you always can weigh in the chat as well. So I'll check in with Amy, then Roshan, and then, I'm sorry, I think I'm saying that right, and then Sophia. So Amy, anything to add? Passing, that's okay. Roshan, then Sophia.
Hi, Roshan here, and I'm working with Amy in the compliance function. So definitely we are, trying to get this accessibility first mindset out to our business areas. We really appreciated the customer accessibility research that Jenna and Sophie did to help us identify barriers and kind of move forward to try to get our products and services more accessible. I liked kind of that first kind of key point that you made about the website being sort of the top consideration for persons with disabilities. That was definitely eye-opening and something that we want to continue to focus our efforts on. Thank you for a very great presentation.
Thank you, Roshan. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name.
No worries.
We're going to quickly check in with Sophie, and then Steve, you're going to be my final takeaway. Sophie.
Hi.
Anything you want to share? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Incredible presentation, and your guys' energy was amazing. So thank you. Yeah, kind of mirroring what Pamela said, I think being able to quantify how much the business could potentially save by implementing accessibility from the beginning is, I just thought that stat was amazing and it stuck with me. And yeah, like Jenna mentioned as well, like a lot of this mirrored kind of what we saw in the research we did for Roshan and her team. So yeah, it was amazing and really great to hear other people talking about this as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Amy, really appreciate it. You weighed in the chat, so thank you for that. Steve, final thought before I go to Jacqueline for her final thought, and then we'll close out for the day.
Sure, thanks. Both y'all did great, and so did Rylan. As an organization that focuses on accessibility, I'd like to see our stakeholders focus a bit more in the area of security and accessibility. Y'all got me thinking about that, and it's like something I haven't really thought through. I mean, we have financial service clients we work with, but I think security could be a really interesting niche to really put our efforts.
You know, Steve, that's actually come up on 4 different calls for me today.
Wow.
That is fascinating. Jacqueline, final, you want to share with the participants and anybody who've used this after before we wrap up?
Never stop talking about accessibility because the more you talk about it, the more comfortable people get. I think it kind of was the boogeyman for a while. Everyone was scared, especially in financial services. It lives in the risk space. I live in regulated spaces. I work with the government and financial services companies. So I found that if you just are kind of annoying about it, you have way more conversations, and it's kind of worth just feeling like a broken record. So don't be afraid to be that person.
Awesome. And once again, I want to take a moment to say thank you to you for coming, to all of our participants for coming. I know not everybody was able to stay the whole time. We will, of course, do a follow-up. There was a question about the organization, the collaboration that Rylan was referencing. We'll make sure to include that. We've got the Ipsos report going to come at you and other resources as well. So stay tuned for those. A huge thanks to Jacqueline and Ipsos. It is amazing to work with you on a daily basis. I truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. Jacqueline challenges me to be all that I can be, and I love that. Rylan,
thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you. And amazing to have Rylan on. I'm so glad we were able to get that video together. And again, our prayers and thoughts are with him. If you have anything else, I believe you're going to be able to stay around, but this will officially conclude today's webinar. So keep accessibility. Yeah, that did not come out the way I wanted it to. But keep talking about accessibility and keep looking for ways to take actions to shift left.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.